You step up to the lane, the same ball you have thrown for 20 years in your hand, and today it just will not behave. One frame it slips off your thumb early and rolls into the gutter. The next frame it sticks, hangs on your hand a half second too long, and pulls across the head pin. You have not changed a thing, yet your body feels like it is guessing. And that little cloth bag you keep seeing the good bowlers pat their hand with, the one that costs about $8, is the whole reason they never seem to have that problem. Here is what I found after weeks of digging. That $8 grip sack is not a gimmick, and it is not really about strength at all. It fixes the one thing that quietly ruins a senior bowler's consistency, and it does it for pennies once you know what belongs inside it. The reason almost nobody talks about it anymore is that the shops that used to teach it now make far more money selling you something else. I am going to show you the exact trail I followed all the way to a bowling manual from the 1940s that spelled the whole thing out. And I promise you this works with the hands you have right now, the ball you already own, and the lane at the center you already drive to on league night. You do not need a new game. You need the one thing they stopped putting in your hand. Let me tell you where this started for me, because I did not believe any of it at first. I was standing in a pro shop that was going out of business, one of those little rooms tucked behind the lanes with the smell of ball cleaner in the air, and the old man closing it down handed me a small canvas pouch from a dusty box. He said, "Folks used to buy these by the dozen. Now they want me to plug their thumb hole for $40 instead." I paid him $1 for it out of curiosity. That dollar bag started this whole case. For a long time I blamed myself. I figured my average had dropped because I was getting older, because my wrist was weaker, because my eyes were not tracking the arrows like they used to. That is the story we all tell ourselves after 60. Every bad frame becomes proof that the body is quitting on us. And the bowling world is happy to let us believe it, because a man who thinks he is just getting old will buy a lighter ball, a new wrist brace, a fresh pair of shoes, anything to chase a feeling he cannot name. But the feeling I could not name was not weakness. It was inconsistency. Some days my grip was fine, some days the ball felt greased. And when I started paying attention, I noticed the difference had almost nothing to do with how I felt, and almost everything to do with the weather. On humid nights, my hands would sweat inside that thumb hole, and the ball would slip off early. On dry winter nights, my skin would go rough, and the ball would grab and hang. My hands were changing hour to hour, and I was trying to bowl the same way through all of it. That was the first clue, and it stopped me cold. Because if the problem was moisture, not muscle, then no new ball on earth was going to fix it. I had been trying to solve a weather problem with my wallet, and the old bowlers, the ones with the steady, boring, beautiful release, they were not stronger than me. They were just managing something I did not even know needed managing. So I started watching their hands instead of their scores. Every single one of the steady ones had a little sack. Some patted it on the fingers. Some rolled it between their palms before they picked up the ball. One woman, easily 80 years old, kept hers clipped to her bag with a shoelace, and she out-bowled men half her age without ever looking like she was trying. I asked her what was in it. She smiled and said, "That is between me and my thumb." That answer bothered me for a week, but it told me one thing for certain. There was a secret here, and it was being kept on purpose. Therefore I went looking for where the secret came from, and the trail ran straight out of the bowling alley and onto a baseball field. The little bag those bowlers were patting is a cousin of the rosin bag, and rosin has a paper trail you can actually follow. Rosin is what is left when you boil down the sap of pine trees, the same sticky stuff that makes a violin bow bite the strings. Baseball pitchers have used it on the mound for 100 years. The official record is clear on this. The American League approved the rosin bag on the pitcher's mound in 1926, put right there behind the rubber so every pitcher could dry his fingers and get a better grip on the ball. Think about that. The people whose entire living depended on controlling a ball decided almost a century ago that the answer was a cloth bag full of pine rosin. Bowlers noticed. In the 1950s, when bowling exploded into the biggest participation sport in the country, there were millions of league bowlers rolling 3 nights a week in every town with a main street. By the early 1960s, the number of organized league bowlers in America ran into the tens of millions. That is not a hobby. That is a way of life. And where there is a way of life, there are people obsessed with doing it a little better than the person in the next lane. Those people all knew about the grip sack. It was as normal as chalk on a pool cue. I found the proof in the old instructional books. There was a champion named Ned Day, one of the biggest names in bowling from the 1930s into the 1950s, the kind of smooth stylist they filmed for newsreels. The teaching of that era, the manuals and the columns, treated hand condition as a fundamental of the game, not an afterthought. They were keeping the hand in the same condition every frame, so the ball would leave your hand the same way every frame. That was the whole philosophy in one sentence. Consistency does not come from doing something spectacular. It comes from removing the little variables, and the biggest variable in your hands is moisture. So, what was actually in the bag? This is where it got interesting, because the answer was not one thing. The classic grip sack held powdered rosin, a fine tacky powder that, when you tap it on your fingers, does not dry your skin so much as give it a slight cling. There were also chalk-based bags and mixes people made themselves. The point was to take a hand that changes with the weather and bring it back to the same feel every single time you reach for the ball. Cheap, simple, repeatable. And once I understood that, the $8 bag on the pro shop shelf suddenly looked like the best deal in the building. But here is the part that stopped me, the thing that turned a simple tip into a real case. When I actually tested a rosin bag, it did the opposite of what I expected. And that surprise is the whole reason most people are using these things wrong, if they use them at all. I always assumed a powder on your hand was there to dry you out and help the balls slide, the way you dust talcum powder to stop things from sticking. That is what powder does, right? Wrong. When I tapped real rosin on my thumb and fingers and gripped the ball, my hand got tackier. The ball did not slide off early anymore. It stayed with me through the swing and released clean at the bottom, exactly when I wanted it to. Rosin does not dry your hand into slickness. It adds a faint, controlled stickiness that lets you hold the ball with less squeeze. Now here is where the confusion has cost people years. And this is the first place I started to get genuinely irritated at how this knowledge got scrambled. There are 2 completely different products that look almost identical sitting in a little cloth bag, and half of bowling does not know the difference. One is the grip sack, the tacky one, for your gripping hand. The other is a slide sack or an easy slide bag, which is slippery on purpose, meant to help a sticky sliding shoe glide on a tacky approach. They come in the same size pouch. They feel like powder. And a person who grabs the wrong one, or who was told years ago that powder is powder, ends up rubbing slippery powder on the very hand that needs grip, then wonders why the ball flies off into the next lane. That is not an accident of nature. That is what happens when the people who used to explain this stopped explaining it. And the reason they stopped is the part that made me sit down and take a breath. And that same forgetting is exactly why I sat down and wrote everything I found into 3 short books, because a hand that behaves is only half of what a senior bowler needs back. What you are learning tonight about grip pressure and a relaxed thumb, I took much further on paper. The 10-second span check that tells you in seconds whether your holes are fighting your arthritis, the looser grip and pacing that stop the thumb swelling and the shoulder burn by the 3rd game, how to bring your hook back this week with a sheet of sandpaper and no new gear, and the 15-foot target and straight ball spare system that ends open frames. Same ball, same alley, same arm you already have. Written for bowlers over 65, Test it against the exact aches you feel by the 8th frame. If you want that whole method in your hands, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment, and the books are yours. Now let me tell you what happened when the trail went cold on me. Somewhere over the last few decades, the pro shop stopped being a place that taught you how to manage your own hands and became a place that sells you permanent, expensive fixes for a problem. A bag of rosin used to solve for $1. Think about what your center offers now. If your thumb feels loose, they will sell you an interchangeable thumb system that can run well over $100 once you add the slugs. If your grip feels off, they will re-drill your ball, or install a new thumb slug, or fit you for a special insert. If the ball is grabbing, they will resurface it for you at $15 or $20 a pop, over and over, season after season. I am not saying every one of those services is worthless. Some bowlers genuinely need a fitting change. But I sat down and did the arithmetic on what a typical senior league bowler spends in a year chasing a consistency problem that is really just a moisture problem. Resurfacing a couple of times a season, $20 a shot. A new insert or a re-drill when things feel off, $60 to $100. A wrist support they were told would steady the release, $30 to $50. Add it up, and you are easily $200 a year, year after year, treating the symptom. Meanwhile, the $8 bag, or the 50 cents of homemade powder, sits ignored on the shelf because there is no profit in teaching a man to fix himself. That is the villain in this story, and it is a quiet one. Nobody is lying to you outright. They simply stopped mentioning the cheapest answer, and over one generation the knowledge slipped out of the room. The woman with the shoelace bag was not being cute when she guarded her secret. She had watched the whole world forget something she knew was worth more than anything on the shelf. Therefore, the question became, exactly how do you use the thing correctly, so you get the champion's steady hand and not a caked-up mess? Because I made every mistake first, so you would not have to. The first thing I learned the hard way is that more is not better. When I got excited and really loaded my hand up with rosin, my thumb caked, the hole got gummy, and the ball actually hung up worse than before. The trick, and this is straight from how the old-timers did it, is to tap, not rub, and to use a whisper of it. You pat the bag lightly against your fingertips and the pad of your thumb, just enough to feel a faint tack, then you pick up the ball. You are not coating your hand. You are seasoning it the way you would salt an egg, not bury it. The second thing is timing. Your hand does not stay the same for 18 frames. On a humid night, you might need a light tap every couple of frames as you sweat. On a dry night, you might tap once and be good for half the game. The whole point is that you now have a dial. Before, your hand did whatever the weather told it to. Now you decide. That single shift, from being at the mercy of your skin to controlling it on purpose, is what those steady bowlers have that the rest of us lost. The third thing is where you keep it. A grip sack lives clipped to your bag, dry, out of the bottom where your shoes and everything else crushes it. Keep it dry and a good sack lasts you years. That is the whole promise in the title, and it is not marketing. One small bag, kept dry and used with a light touch, will outlast 3 or 4 balls. I have watched it happen. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now, because I thought it too. You are thinking, that is fine for the fellow who still has a strong hand and a smooth swing, but my hands are not what they were. My knuckles ache. My grip gives out by the 8th frame. This next part of the investigation is the part I chased down specifically for you, because it turned out to be the most important thing I found, and almost nobody connects it to that little bag. When your hand is tacky in the right way, you do not have to squeeze the ball as hard to hold on to it. Read that again, because it is the whole thing. The number one reason senior hands give out during a game is that we grip too hard to keep the ball from slipping, and that constant squeezing is what lights up the arthritis in the thumb and the base of the hand. It is a vicious circle. The ball feels loose, so you squeeze, and the squeezing wears out the very joints you are relying on, which makes the next frame worse. A proper grip sack breaks that circle. With a little tack on your fingers, the ball wants to stay with you, so your hand can relax. Less squeeze means less strain on the thumb joint, the wrist, and the base of the palm. You are not just bowling more consistently. You are protecting the hand so you can keep bowling for years instead of quietly retiring because it hurts. And here's the piece for the person who says, "I do not even bowl competitively anymore. I just want my hands to work." Everything I just told you about tack and grip pressure applies the moment you walk out of the bowling alley and back into your own kitchen. The same dry winter hands that make the ball hang on the lane are the hands that cannot open a jar lid, cannot turn a stubborn key, cannot keep a grip on a cane or a walker handle when your palms go smooth. You do not need a bowling ball to test this. A light tack on the fingers gives an older hand back some of the friction that age and dry skin took away, and it lets you hold things with less desperate squeezing. That is grip strength you are recovering without lifting a single weight, and it costs you nothing you do not already have in the house. I will tell you exactly how to make that tack in a moment, because that is the heart of what I found. But before I do, I want to tell you about the dead end that finally cracked this case open, because it led me to the document that proved I was not making all of this up. For a while, I got stuck. Every modern source treated the grip sack as a throwaway accessory, a two-line mention in a catalog. Nobody explained the formula, nobody explained the philosophy, and I started to wonder if the old-timers had just gotten lucky with a habit. So I went backward instead of forward. I stopped reading anything new and went hunting for the oldest bowling instruction I could physically get my hands on, the mid-century manuals from when the sport was king and the teaching was serious. That is where I found it. In the bowling instruction of the 1940s and 1950s, from the era when men like Ned Day were the models every league bowler tried to copy, hand condition was taught as a first principle. Not a trick, a principle. The whole method rested on one idea, that the ball must leave your hand the same way every single time, and that you cannot make that happen if your hand itself is a different animal every frame. The old teaching said, plainly, that you manage the hand first and the swing second, because a perfect swing on a slippery thumb is a gutter ball, and a modest swing on a consistent hand is a strike. That was the buried treasure, not a product, a way of thinking that got quietly replaced by a way of spending. So here is the reveal, the thing I promised you at the start, the finale of the whole case, and it is so cheap and so simple that it made me a little angry once I understood how long it had been hidden in plain sight. You do not need to buy the $8 bag at all, though there is nothing wrong with it. The active ingredient, the thing that gives you that clean, tacky grip, is rosin, the same pine rosin the baseball pitchers approved back in 1926, and the same substance that has been on the mound ever since. And rosin is sold right now for a few dollars a cake because string musicians buy it by the ton. A block of violin or cello rosin costs you around $3 to $5, and it is nearly pure. You take that cake, wrap it in a cloth, tap it with a hammer to crack it into powder, and spoon that powder into a thin cotton sock or a folded handkerchief or the toe cut off an old sock tied at the top. That is it. That is the grip sack the woman with the shoelace would not tell me about. A $3 cake makes enough powder to refill your bag for years, which is why one bag really does keep you consistent for years. And the finishing detail, the one that turns this from a tip into the actual method those old manuals were teaching, is this. Rosin gives you tack, but on a very sweaty night, pure tack can turn gummy. The old hands knew to keep the moisture in check first, and then add the tack. So on a humid night, you dab the hand dry, even on the leg of your pants, and only then tap the rosin. Dry first, tack second. That order is the whole secret to a hand that behaves the same in July as it does in January. When you separate those two jobs, drying the sweat and adding the grip, and stop expecting one dusty powder to do both, your release becomes boring. And in bowling, boring is another word for good. I tested this against everything. Against the humid nights that used to wreck my second game, against the dry winter league when the ball grabbed and pulled, against my own aching thumb that used to quit on me by the 10th frame. The homemade rosin sack, used with a light tap, and the dry first tack second order, gave me back a hand that leaves the ball the same way every frame. My average came back. My thumb stopped screaming. And the total cost of the fix was less than the price of one ball cleaning I used to pay for without a second thought. That is the case. Closed. The knowledge existed. It was taught as a first principle by champions when the sport was at its peak. It got buried under a generation of expensive services that had no reason to keep it alive. Someone, the quiet old-timers clipping little bags to their gear, kept it going without a word. And now you are holding the proof. The same proof I found in a going-out-of-business pro shop for $1 and confirmed in a manual older than most of the people reading their scores tonight. Here is what I want you to feel walking away from this. You were never getting weaker in the way they let you believe. You were fighting the weather with your bare hands and paying strangers to sell you everything except the answer. Somebody quietly took a $1 habit out of your hands and handed you a $200 a year problem instead. And tonight you took it back. If you are the kind of person who has always suspected that the simplest, cheapest fix was the one nobody wanted to mention, the kind who trusts a habit that worked for 50 years over a shiny thing that showed up last season, then you already understand what this channel is about. We reopen the cases the world was happy to let go cold. So let me ask you one thing, and I want a real answer in the comments, not just a nod at the screen. On your league nights, does your ball slip off early on the humid nights or grab and hang on the dry ones? Tell me which way your hand betrays you, because the fix leans one direction or the other, and I read every reply. Type it out and hit that comment button, even if it is just one word, humid or dry. This audience never speaks up, and your one word might be the clue that helps the next bowler figure out their own game. And if you want to be there when I crack the next one open, come along with us. The case I am chasing now is about the pair of bowling shoes seniors are throwing away for the wrong reason, and a 15-cent fix from the same era that makes a worn-out slide sole behave like new. Someone hid that one too, and I am close to the bottom of it. Stay with me, and we will bring back one more thing that was quietly taken, the same way we brought back the little bag tonight. Before you go, let me tell you something. This video showed you why that little sack works, but inside the Wise Living Circle I share the full grip sack formula, exactly what belongs inside. And if your hands trouble you, ask me directly, and I answer you myself, not some machine. You belong here with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime. Now that your grip is dialed in, there's one more piece that changes everything. In the very next video, I'll show you how to actually hold the ball the right way, so your arm stays comfortable and your throws stay smooth. It's starting right here.